Recently, I got an email from a camera company asking me to review a certain camera, and I was like, my videos are about live sound, not cameras. And they were like, yeah, we know. We saw them. And we would still like you to try out these cameras. So I read the feature list and I saw NDI. Similar to how Dante can allow you to send audio over the network, NDI allows you to send video over a network. And I was interested in that because long HDMI cables are really expensive and they are really fragile. If you pull on the tip of it accidentally in the wrong way, it breaks. So I thought if I could use a camera and connect it with an Ethernet cable through the already existing network that I have, and in that manner, I would take the image from the camera and send it to OBS directly for streaming for my church, that would be great. And so I told them I'm interested in NDI for church live streaming. And they were like, that's exactly what we want. So they sent me these cameras, this one. Probably noticed that if I move around, the camera follows me. And I really like those. But before we get into it, I would just like to say that this video is not sponsored. There was no money exchange. They did, however, send me these cameras. I did not pay for them with my own money. But after using this camera for a couple of weeks, I do think that it offers a lot of really good features. The camera that we use at my church, it's double the price of this one, and it doesn't offer half of the features that this offers. So let me show you an example of how I'm using these cameras at my church, and then I'll show you what else they can do and how to connect them and set them up. This is the first camera. I set it up on a tripod in the back of the room and connected it with NDI through the network. I'll show you how to do that later. This is the second camera. I put it on the piano, and if you look at the screen, you'll see that it's following me, and it's really small, and the color of it is not distracting at all. The reason I put it there is because I can capture the pianist, I can capture the stage, I can capture the two halls, and I'll show you footage of that in a moment. And for this camera, I used HDMI, not NDI, because I didn't have any extra network cables that I wasn't using. So I found an old HDMI splitter that was not being used anymore, and I used that to connect the camera because the camera comes with a micro HDMI port. So I took the cable, and on one side it's micro HDMI, the other side is full-size HDMI. So I connected the micro HDMI to the camera and the full-size HDMI to the input of the splitter. And then from the output of the splitter, I connected a normal HDMI cable that I had run through the ceiling that goes all the way to the Blackmagic 8M video switcher. I do have 3 network cables coming to stage, but I'm using them for very specific things. So in this case, it was more convenient to just use the HDMI cable to connect the camera. If you look at the TV screen, you will see what the camera is seeing. Now I'm sitting on the piano. It can take a close-up of my face, or we can turn it around to capture the stage or the people. And the auto tracking is really smooth. The movement of the camera while it's following me, it's sort of like ease in and ease out if you do anything with animation. There are other cameras that can follow you, but I don't think any of them is that smooth. I'll show you a bit later footage of me trying the auto tracking for the first time, but this is footage from the 2 services on Saturday and Sunday, and I screen recorded those from the live stream, so don't judge the image quality too hard. It's been through a lot of compression. And look at our little camera right here on the piano turning around doing its thing, and it's so unnoticeable. On that day, the band members came early and I still had the image of the camera on the screen, so they were seeing their faces on the TVs and they had no idea where the camera was. They were like, where's the camera? Who's filming me? And so I pointed it out and they were like, oh, here it is. And that's a good thing. That's always a good thing. We don't want distractions at church. And this is the other camera in the back of the room sat on a tripod connected with the NDI. And if it looks a little bit choppy, this has nothing to do with the camera. It's actually my fault. I had a lot of things on my mind that day, and there's a setting in OBS that I did not change, and that made it appear choppy. And I'll run you through all the setup later in the video, what buttons to press and what settings to do. Back to the piano camera. It's capturing the pianist, the guitarist, and me. This is the main church camera that we have at the back wall of the second hall. And this is the NDI camera in the back of the first hall. And here you can see the camera turning. You can make it faster or slower depending on what you want. Now, the only thing that the big church camera would beat this one at is the optical zoom. This one does not have optical zoom, the other one does. So you can't put this at the back wall of the church and expect to get a close-up of the face of the preacher. If you want to get a close-up, you can put it closer to the subject, and it has this really cool bokeh, however you pronounce it, this background blurry thing. Now you see that close-up, that camera is on the back wall of the second hall. but it has optical zoom, so it can do that. These cameras cannot do that. They can zoom, just not a lot. But that does not make them any less, because the features that these cameras offer is really astounding. And also because it's so small, it doesn't need to be in the back. You can put it in front for close-ups and nobody will notice that it exists. Now I'll show you my first interaction with the camera and how intuitive it was to get started. Let's open the app. I need to make an account. Okay, I guess it's looking for the camera now. I should enable Bluetooth for that. It found the camera, so let's turn it on. Connect the camera to the same Wi-Fi. I can zoom in with the slider. I can move it with the gimbal. I can change the speed of the movement if it's too fast or too slow. And always connect it through cellular data, not Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is laggy and it will not consume any of your mobile data. It's not taking internet, it's just using the hotspot of your phone to send the video feed to the app. This is me walking back and forth in my room just to see how well the camera can follow me. I went out of frame and then went back into frame. It catched me immediately. I come close, it focuses on my face, and I can also make it follow something specific. If I draw a square around my hand, I can make it follow just my hand. So if I'm playing the piano, for example, with my hand movement, it will move my hand down on the piano and it will follow that movement and change with it. What was perhaps otherwise a very boring static shot is now a little bit more dynamic. It's moving around with my hands. And here I am messing with the image settings. I found it to be very intuitive. It's sort of like editing a picture on your phone. The interface looks very similar. You have sharpness, contrast, saturation, hue, whatever these sliders are. And you also have presets for different lighting conditions, indoors, outdoors, tungsten, fluorescent, or you can just set it to auto and it does a really good job at figuring out what the temperature should be. And of course it has autofocus, but you can also do these really cool manual focus pulls. Let's install the computer app. And when you see the network dialog box, do you want to allow a public network or just private network? Always set it to private, because if you're using NDI, OBS will not read any camera that is set to public. It will not show up in the NDI sources. First way to connect the camera is to grab the USB-C cable that comes with it in the box, and it's Type-C from both sides. Now, if you don't have a Type-C connection on your computer, it also comes with an adapter, so you can plug that into the cable and it becomes a regular Type-A connection and you can plug it into your computer. Or if you have a Type-C, just use that. So I'm gonna plug the camera into the cable and then I'm gonna plug that cable into my computer. And then I'm gonna turn on the camera by pressing this red little button. And if you look at the front, it's turning on. Okay, now that I have it plugged in, I can open the app for the camera on my computer and it will automatically connect to the camera. Now I'll unplug the camera to show you if I open the app before plugging in the camera, it will look like this. And now when I plug the USB cable into the computer, it will automatically connect. And you can also connect it wirelessly, but just like this out of the box, if you plug it in, it connects on its own. To decide how I want to send the image from the camera to the computer, I will go to more and then to the output right here. And you have many options. You have UVC, which stands for USB video camera, and you have NDI, and you have RTSP, which we will talk about. But out of the box, the camera does not include the NDI license. So if you want to use NDI, you'll have to buy the NDI license, which is fair, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it over network. You can use RTSP, which comes with it. UVC mode needs to be turned on in order to send the video from the camera over the USB cable to the computer. Now we can go to OBS and I will add a source by clicking the plus button right here, and I will do a video capture device. Let's call this USB cam. Hit OK. And right here, this is the camera of my laptop. So I'll click in here and I will choose OBSBOT Tail Air camera. And here we go. I have the image right here. You can see it's very low latency. I measured it and it's 133 milliseconds, which is a lot faster than the network options, whether it's NDI or RTSP. And that's really cool. But the inconvenience of that is that you can't run USB cables very long. It has to be next to your computer. And that's it. Hit OK. And now if I enable this, I disabled it just so you can see what I'm doing on the screen. If I enable it, I have this right here. Now, how do I control the camera? I can control it from the app. And if I go to console and go down, I can use the gimbal to turn the camera around and move it. Show you my face. I can zoom in right here I can enable the tracking mode from here also. Normal tracking tracks my face. And I can make the tracking fast or slow it down. Now, if I move, it takes more time. It's smoother, it's slower. If I make it very fast, it's snappier. Also, I can do the gestures. If I do this, I will turn off the tracking. If I do this again, it turns on the tracking. I'm not clicking on anything. Remote control, you can turn it on from here. It has a switch. Now that this is on, you can choose the camera. I'm using camera 1. And here you have the zoom thingy. Zoom in, zoom out. You can move it with the gimbal. You don't need to be connected to the app on the computer. You can just use the remote control. Now you might notice that the audio is not in sync with the video. If I clap right here, it's not in sync. So I measured it before starting to record this video, and with the USB connection, it takes 133 milliseconds to arrive to the computer. So I'm gonna go to the audio settings, click on my microphone and go to advanced audio properties, type in 133, hit enter, and now my voice should be in sync with the video. Pretty insane. The second way to connect the camera is with HDMI. You have a micro HDMI port on the back of the camera right here, and you have to get some kind of adapter to go from full-size HDMI to micro HDMI. And I don't like that because HDMI cables are really fragile and they go bad very easily, but it's really easy to set up. You just plug it in and that's it. Keep in mind, I know this might be obvious to some people, but it might also not be very obvious to other people. The HDMI port on your computer is only an output port. It cannot receive any video signal. It only sends out signal. So if you want to use the HDMI connection, you'd have to use some kind of video switcher like the ATEM Mini Pro or an input capture card. The third way to connect it, which I'm really excited about, is through the network. Now, if you look around the camera, there's no Ethernet port. So how do you connect to the network? You'll have to get an extra dongle, which is USB-C to Ethernet. That does not come with it in the box. You have to buy it. So you connect this to the USB-C port on the camera and you connect the other side to an Ethernet cable. And you also have a USB-C port on here to plug a cable to charge the camera. Or if you're using a power over Ethernet switch, you can power it from this. Okay, now what are you gonna plug this Ethernet cable into? Wi-Fi router or network switch. I have at home this little access point, which I use for my mixer. I just plug it into the power strip in the rack and I don't have to worry about cables. Look how cute it is. But it only has 2 ports. Regular consumer routers have 4 local area network ports. So if I need to connect 2 or 3 cameras to the same network, I'll have to use something that has enough ports, because also you need 1 extra port to connect to your computer. So I'll take that cable that's coming from the camera and I'll plug it into one of the ports on this access point, and I'll get another cable and I'll plug it into the other port, and now I'll plug this into the electricity, and finally I will plug this Ethernet to my computer right here. Now this is the camera that I want to get on the network, so I'll turn it on. I'll go down here to the plus and I'll create a new source, and it will be an NDI source. And right here in the drop down, I don't have anything. I have this, which is because I have the NDI tools on my computer, but that's not the camera. Now if you try to click on the plus and add an NDI source and you don't find this option here, it's because you need to install the NDI plugin for OBS. It doesn't come with it by default. So let's go to Google and type in new tech NDI OBS plugin and go into the first link. You get this page. Then let's click on go to download and it will take you to the GitHub page. Go down a little bit and find your operating system. I'm using Windows, so I'm gonna download it for Windows and just install it normally. And after that, if you try to use it, it will probably ask you to install the NDI runtime. So just say yes, and it will take you to this page where you can download the NDI runtime for your operating system. Now, when you open OBS in the tools right here, you'll have NDI output, and in here you have a NDI source. And right here in the drop down, I don't have anything. I'll go to the app, and since I have a wired connection to my computer, I don't need to wirelessly connect to the camera. It will automatically show up in the control app. So that's the second camera that is right here. So I'll click on it. Now I'm controlling this camera. So let's go to more, and I will turn on the NDI mode, and I'll close this and I'll open it again and go to the source name again. And now it shows up, it's Tail Air. Now you can see it's quite choppy. It doesn't look right. So I'll go to the audio video sync and I'll click here and set it to network instead of source timing. Now, if you look, it's really smooth. I'll show you again. This is the source timing. It looks really choppy. And that's what I was talking about in the beginning of the video, that I told you there was a setting in OBS that I didn't change. And that's why the camera looks choppy. That's why. Okay, so change it to network. And here you go. The video is really smooth. Now, if you notice, the colors on this camera look really crunchy compared to this camera. And the reason for that is the color range is limited. So in the YUV range, I'll set it to full. You see how it changed now? Back to limited. Back to full. Now you're recovering a lot of the shadows and highlights from your image. And I don't want audio from this camera, so I'll just turn off enable audio. And the cool thing with NDI is that you can control it from OBS. You don't actually need to open the control app of the camera. So if I enable this pan tilt zoom, I can move the camera from OBS. Let it see me. Okay, I can zoom in. And I'll hit OK and turn on the camera right here. Now, all this time I've been speaking, you may have noticed that this video is very late. And I also measured the delay, and with NDI, it's 633 milliseconds. So if I go to my audio properties for my microphone and I set this to 633, now my audio will be in sync with this camera, but not with this one anymore. Now this video is coming in early compared to this one and compared to the audio. So what can I do to delay the video? I can go to the USB cam right here and click on filters, or right click and hit filters, and under the audio video filters I'll click on the plus and add a video delay, hit OK. And since the USB camera is delayed by 133 milliseconds from the audio and the NDI camera is delayed by 633, what's the difference between those? It's 500 milliseconds. So I'll delay the USB camera by 500 milliseconds. If you don't want to buy an NDI license because it doesn't come with the camera, but you still want to send your video over an Ethernet cable, you can still use RTSP, which comes with the camera. You don't have to buy any license for it. So I'll engage RTSP for the second camera right here that's connected to the router. So what's the method to get the RTSP stream? You go to the plus icon right here and you create a media source. And because this is a media source, it will default to a local file. So you browse a image or whatever on your computer, but we don't want that. So I'll turn that off, and now you have an input right here. Go to the control app, and in the more tab, you're gonna go all the way down till you find about, and here you can see the wireless and wired network IP address. So you're gonna look for wired network, and you can see here it's RTSP and the IP and stream 1. Copy on that, or you're just gonna type it in and go to OBS, and in the input you're gonna paste that and hit OK. And here you go. This is the video from the camera through the network without NDI. Now this is about half a second more delayed than the NDI. So I measured the latency and it was 1.1 seconds, so 1100 milliseconds. And you probably noticed that my audio is completely out of sync with the video. So I'll go to the audio settings right here and I'll set the delay on my microphone, 1100 milliseconds. And now my audio should be in sync with the video you're looking at on the screen. Now what's an easy way to measure the delay? It's just to record a video in OBS and do the clap. And then you're gonna go to your favorite video editor and see the audio waveform and count how many frames from the audio waveform it takes until my hands touch together. And so let's say it takes 19 frames from the audio waveform until my hands touch. If we're doing 30 FPS, you have 30 frames per second. So one frame is 1/30, and that is 33 milliseconds. So if one frame is 33 milliseconds, 19 frames would be 19 times 33, 627 milliseconds. And that is how you can exactly sync your video to your audio and your other video cameras together. Not just look at it and eyeball it. I think that is in sync. So just record a video and take it into your favorite video editor or media player and count from the beginning of the audio until the hands touch. So multiply 33 by the number of frames and you'll get the total delay of the camera. Now I want to show you something really cool with the NDI. If you have NDI tools installed, it's free. You can download it from the internet and open the NDI studio monitor. I will right click in it, Tail Air, OBSBOT. Now I can control it from the NDI monitor because it's an NDI source. If you have any kind of joystick, you can plug it into your computer and the NDI monitor will recognize that joystick as a controller. So I will right click and go to settings, PTZ settings. I have a joystick right here. And right now, if I move the joystick, the camera moves and you can be very slow with it. You can be quick. You can do this. You can go up and down. If I twist it like this, it's zooming in. And if I twist it the other way, it zooms out. That's really cool. So you don't have even to move sliders with a mouse. You can have NDI monitor open on your computer somewhere, and I'm controlling my PTZ camera. And by the way, it doesn't have to be the same computer. You can have a different computer with the NDI tools installed on it and just connect it to the same network that the camera is connected to, and you can control it remotely and see the image of the camera and move it. So let me now very quickly run you through the features of the camera, starting with the tracking. We went through the normal tracking, which just moves. Close up, if I go away, it will come closer to my face. And come close. So it's a follow and a zoom. You can store 3 different position and zoom presets. So if I click here on the arrow, I could update PTZ. So now this position of the camera is stored on that button. So if I move it around like this and I click on this, it comes back. You can also delete the position and you can call it a different name. I'll rename it face. So now I know that this position is the camera looking at my face. So now when I click desk, it goes to the desk shot. And then I click face, it goes to my face. Then I hit close up, it comes closer to my face. And look how smooth the zoom in and zoom out is. That's what I said in the beginning of the video, that it looks like it's easing in and easing out. You see, it's very slow at the beginning and then it speeds up, and then it's very slow at the end also. That's really smooth. And if you hit the reset button, it will bring the camera to the home position or to the default position that it comes in. The second page image, and these are all the controls that change how the video actually looks. So if I turn off HDR and I bring everything to auto, this is how it looks by default. You can see the door of the closet because the light is really strong and it's a reflective surface. It looks burnt. So if I turn on HDR, that is increasing the dynamic range. So I have more room in the highlights and more room in the shadows. So it looks less burnt. And then for the white balance, if I'm outside in the daylight, I can choose that. If I have fluorescent lights, I can choose fluorescent. If I have tungsten lights, I can use that. If it's cloudy outside, I can use that. Or I can set a custom white balance. Then after that, I can change parameters like brightness, contrast, saturation, sharpness, hue. There's a preset for outdoors, looks like this. And if I do custom controls for my room right here, it looks something like this. Now, does this look a little bit too bright? Maybe. I can bring it down a little bit. It's really good. Like, I can use that. I'll do a before and after. This is the before. This is the after. This is the before. This is the after. Pretty good. I might still do some color grading in post, but if I'm using that to live stream, that already looks amazing. And I have pretty bad lighting. Like the lamp is above my head from behind me. My face is completely dark. That's like the worst conditions to film in. And it looks pretty good. You also have your focus. You can make it focus on your face specifically or just have global focus and it just focuses on my face. I'm sorry, that was a bit too close. I would just keep that on face because in most cases you want the face to be in focus. Also, you can do manual focus if you're putting the camera in the back of the room, for example, and people are coming and going and the focus is confused. You can set it to manual focus and bring this down. So we have a specific focal point and the camera doesn't get confused if there's a lot of action going around. Auto exposure, you have the shutter speed. If you turn it down, the image gets darker. Turn it up, gets brighter. ISO, turn it up, it gets a lot brighter. I'm burning the image right now. I'll just keep it on auto exposure. It does a good job. And you can have it either exposed to the face or just the global scene. So you noticed when I put it on global, it went a bit down because of these highlights on the door. But when I put it in my face, it increases the exposure so that my face looks correct, regardless if it's flipping the highlights in the background. So if you think that auto exposure is still a bit too dark, you can make it a bit brighter. If it's still a bit too bright, you can make it a little bit darker. You can say that I don't want the ISO to go above a certain number. And then even if auto exposure is on, it will just auto expose within these limits that you set. And then if your lights are flickering at 50 Hertz or 60 Hertz, you can click these to stop the flicker. Next, beauty. There are instructions on how to use it. So you'd have to turn on the virtual camera in order to see the effect. And then in OBS, you would select virtual camera instead of the normal one. And they recommend to have a certain GPU. Now on my computer, I don't have a dedicated GPU, so it will look very choppy. I'll show you. So you'd have to turn this on. You choose OBS virtual camera and you can see it's already very choppy. Okay, so you need a good graphics card if you want to run these effects, but I'll show you what they are regardless. So I'll click on here on the camera to see what the camera is seeing. But if I bring this down to a lower resolution, okay, that's working well for me. You can do a background blur. That's like the iPhone thing. You can retouch your face. By turning it on, already my mouth got bigger. These are some different things. I wouldn't use that. Something that I would use is this filter right here. This, the film filter. That's pretty nice because the walls are kind of yellow and the light is also yellow and everything seems yellow. So with the film filter, that looks like something that I would actually do in color grading to fix the image. So I like that. Let's go to the more page. And these are some really cool things. Device power on and off. You can auto power off after a certain amount of time, 5, 15, 30 minutes. What's really interesting is this time power off and time power on. This is like your alarm clock. You can schedule it. You can say like Sunday and Wednesday and Friday you have services at church and let's power the cameras on at 6:30 p.m. and power them off at 8 p.m. So you can leave your cameras plugged into power and plugged into everything and not have to worry about turning it on and off. It just knows when to turn on and when to turn off. That's really crazy. And I'm always trying to automate things because I don't have people at my church that are very tech savvy. So I'm always looking to make it as few steps as possible, and that is amazing. Next, the output modes. UVC is USB video camera. That's what I'm using right now. If you turn on NDI, this will turn off. I turn on RTSP, the others will turn off. So you can't have multiple streams running at the same time. You can, however, have UVC and HDMI. I tried it and it worked. Now I'll have to turn off my camera a little bit to show you the media settings, because if I'm sending video somewhere, I cannot change these settings. Here I can change the frame rate of the camera. I can decide the codec for recording if I have a micro SD card plugged into it, H.264 or H.265. That's the more recent high efficiency codec. It takes less space on the hard drive, but it's harder to decode. You can choose the bitrate and the resolution. Same thing for NDI and RTSP, and same thing for the HDMI output. You can set it to 4K or 1080p. You can't do less than that. Now, if you're having trouble with the NDI and it still looks choppy, even if you have done the correct settings in OBS, you can try out the H.265 codec. That will most likely solve it, but not all computers come with that codec installed, so you'll have to install it. Next up, gesture controls. If I do this, it will start auto tracking me. And do this again, it will stop tracking. If I do this, it will record, but I don't have an SD card inside here, so it will not record to anything. If I do this, it will zoom, and I can decide how much zoom I want. This is 2 times zoom. I can make it 4 times zoom. And then you have the dynamic zoom, which you can... Cool stuff. And you can disable these. If you don't want the preacher, for example, accidentally raising his hand and all of a sudden the camera starts moving, you can turn off the first one. Next up, audio. Now the camera has a built-in stereo microphone. I have it off because I'm not using it. Let's say you don't have crowd microphones in your church, but you still want the sound of the congregation to come in the live stream. You can have the default microphone on, and you can turn off automatic gain control, and you can change the level of the microphone, or you can keep it on. And that way you'd have the room sound on top of the mix that is coming from the mixer. And it also has a 3.5mm jack. You can plug your wireless lav microphones into the camera. Mirror image, pretty self-explanatory. It just flips the image. Pan tilt settings. Initial state means where the camera starts. So when you turn on the camera, what's the default position? Tell it that this is the 0 position. So I'll move it here and now I'll unplug. This is the cable of the camera. I will unplug it and now I'll plug it again. I didn't do anything. The camera on its own turned and came back to this position. So these are some really powerful features. If you set a initial position, let's say you are centered on the stage and you also schedule the time on and off of the camera, you really don't have to do anything. Just come to church and the camera is ready for you. It's doing the things that you should do. So depending if the camera is facing you or away from you, you might want to reverse the direction of the gimbal just so you're not confused when you're moving it. In the general settings, you can turn off the buzzer. So when the camera turns on and off and does things, sometimes does little beep, 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 you can turn that off if that's a distraction. You can also turn off the indicator lights. If I turn this off, this will get off. If that's a distraction, turn it on. If you are in a dimmer room, you can just turn down the brightness of the light or turn it up. And if this is on, when you plug the camera into power, it will turn on. And when you unplug it, it turns off. That could be useful if you have a power sequencer kind of situation. Like for example, my mixer and amplifiers plugged into one power sequencer. I just turn the key and everything turns on and off in the correct sequence. So if you're in that situation, when you turn on the entire system, the cameras can turn on with it just by giving them power, and when the power is gone, they turn off. You can also use hotkeys, just like you can do in OBS. If you turn this on, you can use your keyboard on your computer to do certain things in the camera. So if I go to the settings up here, I can go to the hotkeys, and you can hold the Alt button and move with your arrow keys on your keyboard. I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm just using my keyboard. So you can use your keyboard as a controller. Zoom in and zoom out. Let's do this. And you can jump zoom, Alt D and Alt F, Alt G. So if you don't want a very smooth zoom in and zoom out, you can jump. I like that. I like that. Since we're here, let me use again these shortcuts to return to my face. Alt and R resets the gimbal. Do I recommend these cameras for small churches? Absolutely. I think that's the best value for your money. Now with good video, you need good audio. So if you want to take your live stream mix to the next level, click on the video on the screen right now and I'll show you how to mix your live stream in Reaper and send it to OBS over network and all that good stuff. So click on the video and I'll see you there.